Today we're going to be doing a chemical relaxing on virgin hair and on a retouch. So this is done on the left side of the head, and you will use blue gel labeled protective base. You will also be using cholesterol labeled relaxer or straightener. You will need sectioning clips, gloves, a tint brush, and a comb for sectioning. You will also be wearing your mask for the whole operation. But because of the video, I'm going to leave the mask away so that you can see what I'm saying. Okay, the very first step is that you take your blue protective base, and this is basically a protection for burning, chemical burning throughout the head. Now, you're just going to be simulating how carefully you're putting this on. So you're just going to make sure that your instructor who's giving you the test is really watching you put this on. So we're going to start with the front section, and we release it out of the clip, and we're going to use our comb going straight across from the part and lifting every, I would say, about an inch, and go right on the scalp and put your protective base. Then you're going to take your comb and make an arch. Then you go to your next section. You're going to pull it up, separate the hair, put on your protective base, and arch the hair over. We do this until we get to the bottom of this section. It's important that your instructor sees that you're getting every part of the scalp covered. So you want to really make sure you're dipping the blue, your finger in the blue, and really pulling it across. Very important to do the arches, because when you are done, you have to fold all the arches down, and we have to have our separated areas. Okay. Now you're going to flip all ends back this way in the same way. So you're going to take your tail of the comb and pull each piece down in the section that you've had it, so that you could almost see through each arch. My next step is going to be dropping the retouch area in the back section of the same side of the head, which is our left. Okay? So now we're working back here, and you can see there's the arches in the front section. We do the same exact process for the retouch with an added step. So I will show you that in a second. After you get the entire part done, now remember, this is a retouch, so what you do is you're going to come across the head, apply your blue gel on the base, dip again, start in the middle of the hair, and pull it to the ends. The purpose of this is to protect the ends of the hair that have already been straightened previously. So we dip, come back, and then we put more gel from about the 1.5 inch mark, because that's a normal regrowth, is about 1.5 inches. Again, through the scalp, and from about 1.5 inches all the way to the ends, making sure that you're placing your hair back in an arched position. Every time we lift hair and put it up, we take the same hair and pull it down. So we need to pull it down in a very organized way so that we know we've gotten every part of the hair relaxed. Depending on your mannequin stand, you'll be able to swivel the head in any direction you need it to move. If it was a real client, obviously, could tell them to move their head forward or back, whatever you need. It's a little bit more challenging to make these arches getting toward the bottom. Don't be frustrated. It's one of those things that the instructors will be able to see if you're having difficulty with the mannequin stand. A lot of times I scoop the comb back and forth across the hair. I glide it so that it makes a really nice arch when I pull it up. Okay, so I'm at my last two pieces on this side. Again, I'm having just a tiny bit of difficulty with the mannequin stand. Slide this and make my arch. Actually, two pieces more. Okay. Now I'm at my last section. Okay, now I'm going to pull each section down on its own, also recreating the arch going in the opposite direction. It can get a little dicey here because of the weight of the hair, depending on how long your mannequin's hair is. So you want to really be careful to keep it as neat as you can, creating a really nice arch so that it's easily accessible to pulling it down and adding in now your relaxer dash straightener. Because sometimes the state board exam uses the word straightener, I write straightener on the jar. Sometimes they use relaxer, so we also write relaxer on the jar. Okay, now we're ready to begin that process. So now, again, assuming that this is virgin hair, we're going to close our base protecting cream and we're going to open up our relaxer dash straightener, and we're going to take hold of our tint brush. So now you have to remember that no chemical service can be put directly on the scalp. So very similar to a root touch-up, you're going to stay about 1/4 inch away from the scalp. I like to put enough on where it's in the back and in the front. And pull it down. At no time do you use a comb for this process. You only use your tint brush. Again, you're making really careful arches so that we can get air in between the layers and that we can easily access those layers. So we stay, again, 1/4 inch away from the scalp. And we use the tint brush to pull it all the way down to the ends so that the ends are saturated with straightener. If you didn't make the arches nice and neat, it would be very difficult at this time, especially with the protective gel in the hair, to keep a really neat job going. It's important that you have access to each layer of hair that you're working on and that it's nice and saturated all the way to the ends. It's very important to pay attention to the ends. And again, flip that over. And as you start to work, you'll be able to pull up your sections very easily. Again, 1/4 inch away. Pull it all the way down. No combs being used, and making sure that it's saturated on both the back and front of the hair. Quarter of an inch away. Pull it all the way down. You can see that it's saturated on the bottom just purely by the color of the cholesterol. Your instructor will see the same thing. They'll know if you saturated well. Again, make sure these are nice, clean arches. If you see the sides, it starts to look like one of those seashells that have recurring arches, and they're all usually the same size. So it's pretty even to look at. Again, I flatten it out, creating my really neat arch. And now I'm on my last part of this section where 1/4 inch away, all the way down, making sure everything is saturated and uniform, making sure the back is equally saturated, and making my arch. So again, at this point, I'm gonna do the same but opposite. I'm gonna take each layer and I'm gonna pull it down now, making an arch shape with my comb, my tint brush end. can see that I'm really recreating the arch every time I push the hair up and I take the hair down. Okay. The steps of this is the most difficult part to remember, but the process is pretty easy. Again, if you see during the test that you have ends that are not saturated, even if you've already passed that, just redo it at that moment. So now, as you can see, this side is done. Now we're going to go to the chemical retouch section. This is where you really have to pay attention. We've already put base cream on the scalp and from 1.5 inches away to the ends to protect anything that was already straightened. Okay, so what you need to do now is you're going to place your mannequin at this kind of level right in front of you, and you're going to again stick your tint brush in between to separate the sections, and you're remembering that you're still going 1/4 inch away from the scalp, but you're stopping at 1.5 inches. So now you don't comb it through. Now you just place it over the top. You don't spread it through with your fingers. You're never combing hair that's been retouched or virgin hair. So again, you go from 1/4 inch away, pull it down at about 1.5 inches, and use the end just to push it over. So it's very important that you put cholesterol on the front from 1/4 inch away to about 1.5 inches, then on the back from 1/4 inch away to 1.5 inches, and then push it over. Much easier than saturating the whole hair shaft. So again, 1/4 inch away to 1.5 inches, 1/4 inch away to 1.5 inches, and then just use your arches. If you need to push your mannequin forward as you get to the end, it will be easier to manage. These pieces are coming up nice and easy because I've already separated them carefully. 1/4 inch away to 1.5 inches on both sides, and you're gently draping it over. This process is not difficult, but the steps is what causes some confusion for students, and I've noticed that. So you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to the process of what step comes next. Remember, once you open the blue jar, it's blue jar on the back and in the front, and you never go back to the blue jar again. Once you open up the cholesterol, it's cholesterol on the front and the back, and then you don't open the cholesterol again. So getting to the end, I'm just going to say it again. You stay 1/4 inch away from the scalp. You move the cholesterol about 1.5 inches down the hair shaft. Do the same on the back and make your arch. A 1/4 inch away, 1.5 inches down. Do not get it on the ends of the hair. And now we're down to our last piece. 1/4 inch away to 1.5 inches down. Same thing on the back. Now before you finish the process, you pick each piece down, and you could basically look through it and see where your hair is. If you can't figure out where your hair is, look on the side and you will see a gap. That's where you stick the end of the brush. Don't make any new changes at this point. Go with the gap that you've already created. And then you're still going to use the end in this fashion, a circling motion, moving back and forth to make it hook over. These arches are extremely important. It shows that you have good control of your tools and good control of your client. Okay, like I said, again, if you get lost and you don't know what hair to grab, look in the ends, see where the gap is, and pull it straight up from the gap, making a curled motion in the back for it to flap back over. And this would be your full and complete chemical relaxing process, finished in no time at all.